Hey there, it's me, Joel. Welcome back to the podcast that keeps you informed, engaged, and connected to everything happening in the 905 region. Before we dive into today's episode, we want to take a moment to say a huge thank you to our supporters. Yes, that's you, who chip in $5 a month to help keep the 905er podcast going. Your support means we can keep bringing you the in-depth discussions, local analysis, and interviews that matter. Plus, as a supporter, you get access to exclusive bonus content like 905er Extra Minutes, where we go beyond the main episode with additional insights, behind-the-scenes conversations, and extended interviews you won't hear anywhere else. If you're already a supporter, we can't thank you enough. You are the reason we can keep doing this week after week. And if you haven't joined yet, now is the time. It's super easy. Just head over to 905er.ca and click on the supporter tab. For just $5 a month, you get more content, more access, and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping independent media thrive in the 905. So don't wait. Join our community of supporters today. Now let's get on to this week's episode. Hello. This is Joel McLeod once again with a special 905 roundup, welcoming back to the podcast, the original, the beloved, the welcome, the prognosticator from on high, Roland Tanner. Welcome back from, the nether parts of the internet, the breaks, the real life, to come on and, talk shop here. Thank you very much. Welcome back.
Yes. Pleasure to be back, and hi everybody. I'm sure you've missed me as much as I've missed you, or something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, here we are. This is like last week to go of the federal election. Kind of thank goodness. I was commenting to you before we hit record. I am honestly electioned out with this. We had the provincial election at the start of the year, which was all in all, kind of a waste of time. I thought this is necessary. It was destined to be at least by October, so I thought sooner rather than later. But I thought this would be our last episode before the actual election. And there was one event that happened in here in Burlington that really irked me really badly, and that was basically I'm going to call it intimidation of the electorate. And by that I'm referring to, if you're not from Burlington, I'll give you a quick background. As I'm sure every community, wherever you are, has some kind of public all candidates debate. Some local group puts on a forum, rents out a church, a community hall, whatever. All the candidates are invited. You come in and it's a good old fashioned Q&A or a debate, and you get to see what the candidates will do for your riding. It is a traditional democracy. It is a staple of democracy. And here in Burlington, the good people at Port Nelson United Church had organized a community debate for all the candidates in the riding to come out. They had advertised it to their parishioners as well as the larger community of Burlington as a whole on Facebook, social media, to say, come on out, hear what they have to say. And everyone agreed to show up. Everyone had volunteered to take a seat. And my understanding is everyone did attend, except they had to cancel the debate. And the reason why was the People's Party of Canada had organized a pseudo mini convoy to come through to protest or to advocate for their person or whatever have you. And basically the organizers at Port Nelson United said, we just think it's too dangerous. We don't know what this is about. This isn't what we want to do. It's a peaceful, organized public debate. This is not what we want. We can't control how many people are going to show up, what they plan to do, if they're going to be disruptive. And they just shut it down. And I don't blame them. I think they probably did the right thing, to preserve the safety of the church, the attendees who were bothered to attend. But I mean, just like what I'm just saying, this irked me, and I just had to come on and just say, like, these People's Party of Canada, are assholes. They are undemocratic assholes, to do this. And shame on them, shame on their supporters, shame on the candidate. I'll go as far as to endorse that you should not vote for them just for this stunt, on the whole. Roland, what do you have to say?
Well, yeah, but it's very much the modus operandi, right? It's the kind of, what they do is they find things to be outraged about and they get outraged about them, and they are in and really we saw exactly the same thing at the TV debate with, Rebel Media. Now I'm not going to talk about them because they are notoriously litigious, and they like, that's kind of one of the ways in which they fund their, well, what some might say, allegedly, that's one of the ways in which they fund their organization. But, perpetual outrage and, oh my God, this is so wrong. It's kind of the oxygen that they breathe, and how they get media. It's how they get, now, the amount of media that they've got out of this is pretty limited. They've got a little bit of coverage from us. I don't think that's going to help them very much. And they've got, they've got 3 articles in the Burlington Gazette, which, also don't think will help them very much. But it's just, it's so,
yeah,
it's just annoying. And Emily Brown, the Conservative candidate, to her credit, was actually going to be at the debate. That's not that common these days with Conservative candidates. So it's like, okay, we're actually going to have a Conservative candidate turn up at a debate, and the Conservative candidate obviously is the main challenger to the incumbent, who is a Liberal. Wouldn't it be nice to hear those two actually talk about issues face to face? And now that opportunity has been lost. And I mean, I'm just noticing now that I was reading, Pepper Parr's article on the Gazette the other day, and, the ever indefatigable, Pepper, I mean, you got to give it to the guy. The guy produces, content that no one else does. And he's now done about 3 or 4 articles on the same subject. And I guess the PPC still turned up, even though the debate had been cancelled, and they put up a little tent, and about 10 people were there or something like that.
I remember seeing footage, like people had posted like a cell phone footage to social media of people, like my understanding was people showed up the day of to the debate, and there was a notice on the door advertising the organizers had canceled this. It was kind of a last minute. This thing happened so fast that the organizers had learned about this really at like the 11th hour and just said, no, we can't allow this to happen. We can't prepare enough to ensure the safety of people or to maintain the order of the event. And so they kind of canceled at the 11th hour, and there footage of people leaving, and understandably very upset. These were people who are looking forward to hearing, either supporting their candidate or honest citizens looking to be educated on the platforms or whatever have you. And so there's altercations, I saw one calling the PPC supporters Americans, obviously in light of, what's going on south of the border, and whatnot. But again, it's just like, yeah, I mean, that woman was absolutely right. I mean, I thought she was a little toned down in her comments to them, in my own opinion. But yeah, I mean, that's just, I can absolutely understand the outrage and the anger, rightfully so, towards the PPC, supporters.
Yeah, and these all candidates debates are always put on by volunteer organizations, people just doing it for the good of contributing to local democracy. They always are, I mean, I've been involved in some of those in the past as not when I was part of a political party, but with the kind of non-political hat on, it's a hell of a lot of work for not a lot of sort of thanks at the end of the day. So it's annoying. And, I mean, again, the suggestion you made, well, like, frankly, it was 15 people. What are you scared of? Did you really need to cancel it? But that's their discretion, right? They're volunteers.
Well,
I mean, if it was CBC, I'd say, yeah, maybe don't quit quite so easily, but it's not the CBC.
here's the thing.
Some volunteers from Burlington.
You don't know, there's 15 people at the start. You don't know if there's more on the way. And quite frankly, it was a church hall democratic debate. Like we shouldn't have to call out, the Halton PD or the, higher private security to maintain order. This is supposed to be like in my head, I'm picturing like the Norman Rockwell, painting of the man standing up in the town hall, asking a question of his representatives. It's like that to me is the purest form of democracy. We all show up, say, I have a question, my job, my family, whatever. What are you going to do about it? And these PPC thugs are looking to disrupt it. And quite frankly, I really can't blame the Port Nelson United Church, volunteers who organize it to shut this down. Cause quite frankly, you don't know what's going to happen. Is 15 people in the first 15 minutes, does that turn into 45, 50, 100 people in an hour? Not to mention 15 people can really disrupt a local, proceeding very easily. I mean, just being rude, obnoxious, shouting things that you shouldn't be shouting, not,
we should maybe make it clear that the reason that the PPCs were protesting was because they were saying that they were being denied free speech because they weren't included amongst the panel of the kind of the main candidates, and the organizers had used the same criteria that are used in the TV debates for sort of deciding who, because there's the more people you have in one of these debates, the less of a debate it is, because you have 30 seconds for, someone who was until very recently a very senior minister in the government, and exactly the same amount of time for someone who, the quality of some candidates on some of the more fringe parties is not, let's face it, always that great. They're not always that wonderful to listen to. Now, obviously everybody's got the same right to access to democracy, but actually the people who organize these events have got every right to invite who they want and do what they want. There is no obligation on anybody, to let anybody speak. And it's reasonable to say, you know what, we're going to have the obviously primary candidates plus some obvious candidates who aren't going to win, but who are at least from parties that have significant support in the community. And we're not going to bother with 10 fringe parties who are just going to kind of ruin the thing for everybody. That's fair enough. That's their decision. They can do that.
I mean, I get a sense, I maybe this is touching, or shifting gears a bit on this. And I get the sense, and I'll run this by you, this sense this election, there's a bit of a taking back democracy from these fringe groups, the convoy yahoos that we saw, that I felt had kind of dominated our politics for the last 4 years or so. And I'm getting a sense in this election. I mean, I'm not saying we're completely out of it, but that there's the average everyday Joe and Jane Canadian just saying, I've had enough of this. Like we have very serious problems with south of the border. Our economy, our country is under threat. What do we do? And we need more than just, the convoy idiots whose only political personality is a F Trudeau or now F Carney flag on the back of a semi truck. And I mean, I'm getting a sense of people just saying, I'm fed up with it. We need to move on with, with the real issues of the day.
Yeah. I mean, Jean Chrétien, he's always, good for a quote, sort of put it most succinctly of anybody I've seen talking about it. And it's like, wow, Donald Trump's done more for Canadian unity in a month than anybody else has been able to do in about 15, 20 years. And it's true because Trump has, through a number of crass and offensive statements and acts, revealed the hypocrisy at the heart of the kind of conservative right of wrapping themselves in the flag at the same time as they want to kowtow to a would-be dictator south of the border.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, you can't have it both ways. Are you a Canadian or are you a fan of this racist douchebag? You choose which side you're on. And when most people, when given that choice of like, which side am I on? Am I Canadian or otherwise? Go, I'm Canadian. So, he absolutely is. Now, we still haven't had the results yet. I mean, it still seems like it's a fairly close election. But certainly, the last time I was on this podcast and we were talking about it, it seemed like, the cataclysm was just a matter of time, that Pierre Poilievre was going to be our prime minister and so on and so forth. So thank you, Donald Trump, for seemingly reminding Canadians about what's important. We'll see. I mean, still seems like Alberta will go its way and maybe some other of the Western, provinces, but, yeah, I mean, it's, you can't wrap yourself in the flag and then I hate everything about the country that you're wrapping yourself in the flag of. I've never got that. And the hypocrisy has been revealed.
Well, that's good. I mean, for a while I had a problem rationalizing the polls. This time last year, you and I were kind of in a state of funk of just looking at the polls and like, what is people finding it attractive about conservative politics at this moment, other than you're angry and pissed off, which yes, you have had every right to be. A lot of things were just not working out the way that people wanted to, but the enthusiasm, we're talking like a 200 seat supermajority for the Conservatives. I said, I didn't quite get that level of enthusiasm.
I think there was there's a visceral tiredness with Trudeau, which comes to every leader eventually. But there was always a section of society that just viscerally loathed him from day one, and that section grew over time.
But I think you and I were, I don't want to say we're in that camp, but you and I were both talking like, Trudeau's got to go. Whatever he's going to do, that was it. Like I don't know what's the next chapter he needs to write. And it took him a while, but he finally got the message. And I think once that happened, I think Canadians breathed a collective sigh of relief and said, okay, back to normal. You got 10 years. You did what you got. 10 years seems to be kind of the official, unofficial deadline, lifetime of a prime minister's government. And he finally got the message, took his walk in the snow, so to speak, and then, graciously resigned, moved on. Canadians seem to be warming up to Mark Carney. I'm excited to see what he may or may not do. I think Pierre Poilievre, like the numbers just seem more in tune with what I hear on the ground, is that Pierre Poilievre just doesn't seem ready for the job. Now, whether you can agree with him or not, the fact of the matter is, like, you're going up against a guy who's a governor of two central banks of two major G7 countries, and to say, I know better than him how to restructure an economy for a racist demagogue south of the border who's going to blow up the entire global system. I'm sorry, but your resume just isn't that impressive. I mean, you and I are more qualified to run the country than Pierre Poilievre, Roland.
Well, a lot of the sticks that they've been beating the Liberals with for a decade of, he's a prime minister's a drama teacher, all this stuff. All of a sudden, all those sticks are now available to be used against the Conservatives, because it's like, well, what's your guy ever done other than been a political flunky since the day he left school? Which criticism that certainly could be and has been leveled against pretty much all the previous, I mean, maybe not Erin O'Toole, but, I can't remember if he'd actually had a job, but certainly not,
Well, Erin O'Toole.
Anyway, that's by the way. It's just, a lot of these kind of things about why people hate the Liberals are no longer there in terms of the leader anyway.
Right.
He looks like a guy that Conservatives can get behind. And so I guess it maybe associates that sort of desire for a change, but not a dangerous change, people had it with Trudeau, and, it's like, well, the only alternative was Polyev. Well, now they've got two alternatives. Either you can have this new guy, who looks the part, as far as people seem to be thinking, or you can have this guy who's, who hasn't been able to pivot even a little bit, seemingly, from the fact that the world has changed now since Trump got back in, really, the minute Trump got back in, again, Doug Ford, to his kind of credit, realized what the story was now. The story is Trump. That is the only issue. What to do about Trump. There's a single question election provincially, single question election federally. What do we do about Trump? And, if you've at least got to try to fight on the battleground that people want to fight on. I mean, that's a phrase that I've stolen that from someone else. I can't remember who it was. You can't find an election that nobody wants to argue about. So like all the stuff that we've been talking about, like housing and, gender identities and all this stuff suddenly stopped being something that anybody was really interested in terribly much anymore. And it's like, what are we going to do about Trump? The only thing anybody's talking about when you go and meet friends, when you go to the pub, when you go and have dinner with your relatives, what are you talking about? Are you talking about housing policy? I doubt it. I'm going to guess that Trump comes up pretty quickly, that tariffs come up pretty quickly.
Perfect example. This weekend was, Easter. And I trust our listeners probably had an Easter dinner with family or friends or somebody close by. I went down to my in-laws and they live in, Norfolk County. They live down now, and a number of them work, in the I'm going to say auto industry. They work plant producing auto parts. That again, these parts will go south of the border, back up. They'll buy parts back up to put stuff together and it'll go into an automobile. And they know that whatever we're working on is probably going to go back and forth across the border 20 different times, before it finally goes into the automobile in question. And they're sitting there like, what will tariffs do? And do you still have a job? Are they cutting down shifts? Are they whatnot? And so far, no, they're not talking about that. They're not doing that. But again, you're right. This is what everyone is talking about. Are we not going to shut down plants necessarily, but they're worried about, okay, are they going to start rolling back hours? Are they going to start rolling back, maybe limiting number of shifts that we're going to be operating at? And they know that they're the higher ups in the, excuse me, folks, the higher ups don't really know. They're like, their business was entirely built on, I put the widget in the bolt and I send it across the border to get the bolt put into the thingamajig. And the thingamajig gets put into the whatchamacallit, and the whatchamacallit gets put into the car, and the car gets sold to the lot. That was how we all assumed the auto industry operated. And now Trump has thrown it up in the air. And so the idea of, well, housing and whatnot, yeah, it's there, but I think it has definitely taken a back burner. Same as like carbon tax. That's the other thing about the carbon tax. Carney reduced it to zero. And I saw today online, when the day he reduced it to zero, the minute that took into effect, we saw a drop in oil and gas prices at the pump. Today somebody posted about how gas prices have come back up. And I remember saying, we aren't going to notice it. You'll notice it for like a weekend, which we did. And that was great. Fill up, go visit friends and family. And now, the market's doing what it does. It eats up that loss and the price goes up and it's completely unaffected by a carbon tax or your behavior or whatever have you.
And the drop was far more, it just so happened that the carbon tax being put to zero or whatever happened at the same time as Trump was doing Trump's thing about tariffs, and he has created a global drop in gas prices, in gasoline prices. So yeah, it's cheaper in Britain right now too. That's nothing to do with the Canadian carbon tax, folks. It's dropped everywhere.
But that's the thing, like, energy prices are not dependent on carbon tax. The idea of the carbon tax is like, that price is going to go up or down depending on a myriad of factors. Ukraine, trade policy, production quotas, all that stuff. Charging a carbon tax on it was the idea, like, it'll maybe cost you an extra couple cents at the pump, per liter, but that money will go into it. Now, that conversation has been poisoned. The facts don't really matter on that front anymore, and we have to concede defeat on that one. But again, it kind of shows you, like, Paul, you ever say, "Oh, prices will drop and everything will become more affordable once we get rid of the carbon tax." Well, we got rid of the carbon tax. It's been a month now, and life has not become magically more affordable to Canadians. And it just I think it kind of goes to show this. Slogans are not a plan, especially they're not a plan to deal with what Donald Trump is threatening to do to the global order.
Yeah, I mean, and probably the biggest problem right now it's the uncertainty because the guy is too much of a egomaniac imbecile to ever admit that he's made a mistake. So they paused the tariffs against everybody apart from but only for 90 days. They're going to come back. So everybody's left not knowing. It's like, is the moron going to try again, or has he basically been defeated and he's going to chicken out? We don't know. And in that situation, you can't plan. So obviously that's the only thing that matters anywhere right now. And there may be 5 or 6 issues in any election that people are talking about, but there's usually 1 or 2 big ones. And the big one would have been, if Trudeau is still around, the big question would have simply have been, do we want to keep Trudeau? It wouldn't have been, do we want conservative policies? I don't think that was actually ever the issue. It wasn't the issue when Kathleen Wynne got beaten. It was like, we're sick of these guys. We're sick of the Liberals. We're sick of what they sound like. We're sick of that tone of voice that Liberals give us. And Justin Trudeau certainly had a tone of voice that could be wearisome at times. I'll attest to that. And it's like, thank God the guy's gone, right? That issue's resolved. It wasn't about what the Liberals were doing, which was never, let's face it, terribly earth-shattering. I never thought so. Sure, there were these nutbars who felt that they were, somehow living in this dreadful, autocracy. But I think we're seeing down south right now what that can actually look like when your freedoms are genuinely being impinged on by a government. And it's a very different thing from anything that Justin Trudeau ever did.
Well, I look at hope. I mean, I guess I can come out and say it. I like what Carney is saying, mostly with his closer ties to Europe. I think it's our only hope going forward. My question has always been, well, I think the American order is being upended as we speak. I've said before on this podcast, anyone listening, is I get the sense there are 2 types of people in Canada right now. There's the people who are leaning mostly conservative right wing who think this is a blip. We just need to get through the next 4 years and we'll go back to normal and everything will go right as it were. We just need to have somebody to talk to Trump and say, give us a break and everything will go back to as it was. And I think they are in the minority. The rest of us look and say, we can't trust the Americans anymore because as much as we don't like Donald Trump, there's somebody worse. I know it in my bones. There's somebody worse waiting somewhere in that country who is going to do far more damage, far more, hostility towards us and the rest of the world. So we kind of have to start thinking of America as a reliable partner. They need to figure it out on their own. We can't help them figure it out. They got to do it on their own, which means we need to look for our own friends, which is the Europeans. Hopefully Britain in the post-Brexit era is included in that. But I'm thinking the Australians, the, New Zealand, Kiwis, the Japanese, South Koreans for starters, and go from there and build a viable trading network of like-minded democracies, who can we put our smarts and our technology and our resources into building a new kind of global order. And I think, yeah, Canada has a chance to be the leader here.
I was listening to another podcast the other day, just not a political podcast, not a political podcast at all, but smart people Americans talking about it and mentioning what's the guy's name? A performer, it doesn't matter who it was, a performer coming to Toronto, American performer coming to Toronto, and noticing that all the comments sort of online were, well, I guess I'd already bought the ticket, so I'll go and see him, but I'm not, there's no way I'm not buying a theater, I'm not buying any, and they were like, why would you do that? Why would you want to punish this performer who's a perfectly nice guy and not necessarily a Trump supporter in any shape or form? And it's like, you don't get it. Basically, Trump and his government basically declared war, and one of their first acts on returning to power declared economic war on their closest geographic and political ally, the people who stood side by side with America on so many issues. And you stabbed us you didn't stab us in the back, you stabbed us in the front and said, screw you, you're all a bunch of whinging, sponging, whatevers. Yeah, we're mad. And it's nothing to do with, that performer may be the nicest guy in the world, but we're not going to contribute anything economically if we can avoid it to any American once it gets on. You've made your bed. That guy may not have voted for it, but the American government, the American state, through the people who voted for it, have made their bed and they now have to lie in it. And we're going to make sure that you lie in it as fully as possible. And it's not against any individual person. But it's like, you don't understand just how hostile what has been done is, short of declaring war and invading, which, let's face it, the guys have also talked about that. This is about as aggressive as one government can be to another. Okay, I guess there's economic sanctions and things like this, but basically this is economic sanctions. This is economic sanctions by a different route. So yeah, people are mad, and it's not going to go away quickly. And the only way that this is going to end is by Americans learning that they've made a huge and horrific mistake. And I was talking to someone yesterday actually about having been down in Florida during sort of March break period for business. Said I've never seen Miami so dead for an entire week during the March break period. It's dead. The streets are empty. The hotels are empty. And it's like, that's not just Canadians. That's people coming from other parts of Central and South America.
Well, how many Europeans say, yeah, so, there used to be a time, maybe last generation ago where America was a glamorous place to visit for Europeans. The American culture and lifestyle was that as much as we might think of it as quaint or kind of roll our eyes, I know for some Europeans it was different. It was like the equivalent of us going to Europe. And I think that you're right. That has just kind of been torn out the window, torn up and thrown in the fire. And it will take some time. Like this, America is big enough. It will not happen overnight. Restructuring our economy is not going to happen overnight. But I wonder, the questions I have are more forward thinking than the American-Canadian relationship. I'm curious to know, where does Canada sit in the world, especially when we have China trying to make their play. They're seeing this and they're making their play. They're making their play to be the top dog in the world. And we have to wonder, what does that look like if China makes a play to be the superpower economy for the 21st century? What does that leave us? Where does that leave us and the Europeans and the Australians? Do we want to be tied to the Americans? Because as much as the Americans have a lot of money, but they don't do anything. All they have is a lot of IP. I've heard people say, if China decides one day to say, we can really tank your IP by releasing counterfeit products, such as like Microsoft Office and products that were huge sellers for many American companies. They just like counterfeits on it because they just say, forget it. We'll tear up all the trade agreements. do we want to be tied to that? Because then America becomes essentially useless or worthless. And
I think there's two sides to it, and that one is we need to stopping thinking about China as somewhere that produces cheap crap and undercuts us. We're in a world where Chinese universities are some of the best universities in the world, where Chinese people are some of the best educated in the world. So it used to be like, well, they can produce their cheap crap, but we'll compete by being better educated, by being smarter, by doing research, by innovating. It's like, well, okay, so they're as well educated, possibly getting better educated. They're innovating. They're doing science. They've got the money. They also own a huge proportion of America's sort of sovereign debt. The guilt issue, which arguably is behind what really sort of forced Trump to a U-turn, was they were seeing U.S. debt was they weren't going to be able to sort of get the money that they wanted. And it's like, again, someone else was saying, well, I deal with Chinese companies for imports. Their employees have job security. Their employees have pensions. Their employees have healthcare. The American guys I'm employing don't have any of that. We need to stop thinking in quite this sort of cliched way. Now, China is not a democracy. It's a dictatorship. And I think we need to keep that front and center in our minds more than we maybe do. Well, that's not a good situation if they're the most powerful country in the world.
And that's where it comes down to. But I think if China does become the number one superpower in the world, the question I have is, do we rethink the way we structure our economy? But I'm thinking of BYD, right? BYD is now poised to be the number one auto manufacturer in the world. I think it only took them, 10 years to get there? That's astounding. I understand China has billions of people living there, so that their economy is homegrown, easy to upscale your economy. But BYD has huge amounts of Chinese government money directly ingested into that cycle. They have massive amounts of government capital put into the company to make it go. And here in North America, in the West, we associate that with, well, it's going to be an inferior product. Like we just associate, government funding, therefore you must suck at doing what you're doing. It's an inferior product. It's not. From what I understand, a car made by BYD is not only cheaper, but it is just far superior to anything we're manufacturing in the West, European and North American auto industry alike. And I have to wonder, how is that? Like, there's a cultural thing, I'm sure. There's a more risk-taking culture as well. But there's something there that if they're able to build that many cars so quickly and sell them that cheaply. Now, maybe it's a long-term strategy if they sell cheap cars and all of a sudden the cheapest, $19,000 car is going to balloon to $40,000 as soon as they have market dominance. But I wonder, do we have to start thinking a bit more like the Chinese to sell our goods and services around the world? And I'll be honest, I'd be open to have anyone tell me why I'm wrong in that, but I do question, everybody wants a BYD car. Everybody wants a BYD car because they're cheap and good and they're stylish.
And they're following the model that the Asian nations have all followed since the Second World War. I mean, there was a time when Japan was, Japanese cheap crap or cheap crap from Hong Kong.
Right.
Why is everything made in Hong Kong these days? Oh, it's just garbage. Well, Hong Kong's not making garbage anymore. Japan certainly isn't making cheap garbage anymore. And you can go through, after that, it was Korea,
Yep.
It's gone through each of the countries, and China is the biggest and best at that. And they've gone through being, we're just the cheapest, and the stuff isn't necessarily great. And that's certainly still an element. We're not denying that. But they used that massive economic influx to fund, better universities, better education, better everything, basically. And they're just out competing us, in every way. And on top of that, they've got, if you've got an obedient workforce with a very high work ethic, which Japan has had and China has and these other nations tend to have. I mean, maybe it's a cliche. I don't want to get into kind of stereotypes, but at the same time, I think there's a strong element of that used to be, countries with sort of strong drive and, individually strong drive and sort of self-discipline or collective discipline do well, because of course you would. It's just a good characteristic to have if you're wanting to produce a lot and outcompete someone else. I don't think we're really, anywhere in North America. I can't speak for Mexico. I don't know it well enough, but certainly for the US and Canada, I think we're doing a very good job on building a kind of disciplined and driven workforce these days. I don't think anything Trump's doing. I mean, he's, just by
that's just it.
Treating his citizens like utter shit is going to do anything to turn that around.
Well, that's just it. So how do you compete? I'm emboldened by the fact that Carney is at least talking about AI. I know that there are huge issues surrounding that. However, it's not going away. I think you can talk about copyright, security to people, how to give credit where it's credit's due for the creative aspect. But I'm thinking more along the lines of AI in terms of automation. How do you, putting AI onto a factory floor so that it's able to make, that automated process is a lot more, able to happen a lot more frequently, efficiently in mass produced stuff, or to be able to analyze a situation and make a prediction in terms of what the best course of action would be, is really where I think AI is potentially going to help impact our economy. The idea of, okay, make me a picture of, Roland and Joel talking on a podcast, that will be I don't think we'll ever get there, and I don't think anybody cares about that. But where I think we need to think about AI is that being able to predictive market flow, or the idea of how to see those missing gaps that human beings tend to miss, is, I think, really going to be a really powerful tool in the coming economy. And that's something that I've never heard anyone talk about except for Mark Carney, which, again, I'd like to hear a little bit more and hear what he has to say about that, because we do have to start thinking. I think we're at a point in this election, we have to start thinking beyond 4 years. We need to start thinking about 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and what Canada is going to look like, or where Canada's place in the world will be, whether that's we in a trading block of just like-minded democracies, and we trade and we sell what we got there, or are we willing to go to China and say, okay, we're going to trade, but we're going to trade on our own merits and our own value. And what will that be? What will we bring to the table? Because the other thing before I finish this thought, we're talking about natural resources, and everybody thinks initially going to oil. But here's the thing. Look at what China is doing. I just mentioned BYD. BYD is an electric car company, the biggest in the world. The Chinese are doing what it took us, the entire post-war world, to do in the electrification of their economy. They're doing it within a heartbeat, it seems. I recently read where Chinese scientists have unveiled a more efficient way of producing nuclear power, so they can get more power out of their plants. Which, if they're able to do that, and again, they'll be able to introduce that technology into their plants so much more more easily. They won't need our oil. Or if they do, it'll be on a minimal level, that it's not going to be this great big influx of wealth that Alberta and maybe Canada is predicting. What happens then?
People need... Albertan oil is important to Canada. It's not important to the rest of the world. It's kind of it's a drop in the ocean, and the trouble with Alberta oil is it's the most it's enormously, at the whim of what's happening in the rest of the world as to whether it's worth using Alberta oil more. It's only worth digging out the ground when everything else is expensive.
Right.
Because it's so much more expensive to extract. So, certainly heard it from people working in the Canadian oil industry that, it's like, Alberta oil is just not worth that much to the oil companies. The real stuff is being done elsewhere in the world. However, obviously it's important to Canada, but, yeah, we have to be getting there. I mean, China is not a nation that I'm aware has huge oil reserves, and they're managing to kind of clean our clock anyway.
Yeah.
And obviously we're heading towards a post-oil, world. Whatever you think about cars and all the rest of it, we're now seeing, just walk down the street, a percentage of every car that passes you is electric. We're heading that way. America's going through what it's going through because it's an empire in decline, and that's what empires in decline do. They have the sort of trauma of realizing that things are not going their way quite like they used to. And there's this harking back to the past. I mean, you could say about Britain exactly the same thing. Growing up in Britain, people are constantly talking about the sort of glory days of the British Empire and all the red bits on the map and all this stuff. And it's like, dude, the world has moved on. Get over it. And America's going into that phase. The US is going into that phase, I think. And I think it's been obvious to a lot of people for a long time that China is the nation that's on the rise, and there's like all kinds of reasons for that. We have to be prepared for it. And I think Canada needs to, if you add up all the nations that are similarly minded to Canada in terms of how we operate politically, around the world, Europe, obviously, the other, sort of Commonwealth nations, well, certainly Australia, certainly New Zealand, South Africa, maybe, you have so much in common with those nations, that collectively we can do a hell of a lot. I think it's just a healthy thing anyway to sort of wean ourselves off a kind of over-reliance on the US, and an excessive degree of trust in what the US will do. I always thought it was weird when I emigrated here that, factories would all have a Canadian flag and the US flag out front. And it's like, why have you got the American flag up? This is Canada, isn't it? And I get that really good motive that that the US are our friends and all that stuff. But there's not many countries in the world where you go where they have other people's flags outside their buildings. And maybe it's part of that kind of growing up process that we need to go through now that,
I always viewed that part was more of a reflection of there is a unique relationship between America and Canada.
No, I don't want to imply that it's a mistake or it's wrong or anything like that.
But I do think, but on that note, I can picture a lot of those American flags being taken down because my sense is there's a sense of betrayal between Canadians. Like we have built this relationship that is unique in the world, in the history of the world. No one has kind of built this two sovereign nations that are so mutually dependent on each other for survival and for success, but yet have still maintained unique separate identities, languages in some cases. We are the same, but we are very different. Nobody's going to confuse a Canadian for an American or an American for a Canadian. That kind of thing. And yet we kind of grew up to the point where I would argue that for a lot of Canadians and some Americans, they would view the relationship more, not as an ally, but as a family. We in some cases, we literally do have family on either side of the border.
Yeah, it's very common. Yeah.
And the last 3 months, this has been 3 months. The sense is the Americans have kind of just torpedoed that entire relationship. What took 200 years to build since the War of 1812 to build into a prosperous, mutually beneficial, complex relationship. In 3 months, I think that the Americans have pretty much destroyed this relationship and kind of spit in the eye of Canadians. And we are a proud people. We don't boast. We don't make, huge grandiose claims, but we know our worth. We know our value. And to have somebody, and I always like to think of, we're the kind of people, we will always honor our friendships, and we will always come to those in our aid, and especially our friends and allies, but we never forget a betrayal. And I don't see this as a memory that this generation or possibly even future generations are going to really forget. And it might take a while for the Americans to realize what they've done, but that's not on us. We'll move on. We will either find new trade relationships with the Europeans or with the Australians, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, maybe even China. Maybe we'll go back and we'll negotiate a different trade agreement with China, and we'll be forced to do that. Who knows? I don't know. But America will wake up one day and realize that it's fallen behind, and we need to make sure that we're not the ones playing catch up to them.
And the US ultimately is not an island. They depend on their allies more than they perhaps have realized. It's tragic, really. It's tragic that it's come to this, but it has, but yeah, like you say, we're not going to forget if the next president of the US is, hopefully not Donald Trump, A, and B, a return to some kind of sanity and normalcy. I don't think that's going to rebuild everything overnight. Yeah, that'd be great. We'll welcome that, of course. Maybe people will start going to the US again for their vacations or whatever. But I think there's a degree of that is gone. Like you say, at least for a generation. Because I can't believe that if the next president is a better president, that the president after that won't be, unless the Republicans really change the core ideology, that's not going to be part of our future.
Well, that's just it. I don't think it's a presidential thing. I think it's a last time I checked, America is still a democracy, and it is a democratic thing. There are people who, I don't want to call names, but they are just stupid. They will shoot themselves in the foot in the name of freedom because they think it spites the woke. Like, they don't even know why they're doing it to themselves. It's other than the fact that, I hurt my neighbor. I'll spite myself if it means that you're worse off. And it's like, once you get into that mentality, it is a race to the bottom, a literal race to the bottom of, I don't care how bad it hurts me, as long as it hurts you even more, I'll do it. And that's what I'm fearful that America is. And I look at that and I say, here in Canada, we need to steer as far away from that as possible in our politics and in our economic ties. Trade when necessary. I think we'll always need to trade with the Americans just because of geography and the fact that they're so large. But, we have, I think there are many other people who see what we have, they value what we have, they value what we do, and we need to start kind of owning that a bit more. I look at America and I just say, like, the idea of this shining city on the hill is just a myth right now. And it's clearly a culture where it's cruelty for the sake of cruelty's point. Like, there is no commonality of, like, let's build something great here. I just want you to suffer. I want you to suffer worse than I'm suffering right now. And I'm hurting pretty bad. And I look at it and say, my take is that, kind of bring this north of the border, the right in Canada, PPC and the CPC, are struggling with that identity. I don't think maybe the PPC does want to do it, but I think the Conservatives don't want that mentality. And they're struggling to figure out, like, where do we fit in this new world? That being angry for the sake of angry and just saying, well, you're woke and I'm angry, so I'm going to make you hurt as much. And it's not working out. Canadians don't buy into it. I think we are, at our core, we are good people that say, If I help you out, you help me out. By helping you, you help me. And that may take on different forms, but I think that, like, I wonder, my hope is after this election, if the polls are true and they do seem to show possibly another fourth liberal government, if that happens, the conservatives need to sit down and look at themselves and say, we need a serious gut check time. We need to kind of top to bottom, inside and out, what's going on, and purge this American trait from their party. I don't know what a Canadian conservative looks like, but going forward past this election, it can't be an American. It can't be. I think our countries are going to go in two separate, different directions. If they want to be competitive in Canada, they need to purge this trait from their party and figure out what a Canadian conservative looks like, because it can't be an American wannabe.
Yeah, well, we shall see, I guess. It'll be interesting.
We'll see, probably in about a week's time, or a little under a week, depending when this airs. But, on that note, folks, we're going to call it quits, and we'll see you next week. Make sure you go out and vote if you haven't already done so. Can't stress that enough. Please do so. Oh, and, I keep seeing this online, so I just thought I'd bring it up. Don't worry about bringing a pen or a Sharpie or whatever to the polling station. The Elections on Canada has done this a million times across the country. They are prepared. Bring a pen or bring a pencil, but my God, don't, whatever this Sharpie thing is, it's not a thing. Just show up and vote. Do your Canadian duty, folks. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm Andrea Askowitz.
And I'm Allison Langer. And we are the hosts of Writing Class Radio, a podcast, but we are so much more. We have writing classes. So if you are looking for live online classes where you can join a community, write to a prompt, get feedback, and get better, check out all our classes at writingclassradio.com.
And listen to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at writingclassradio.com.
Hi, it's Ashley and Jess with Wellness Reality Check. We are two health practitioners, moms, and best friends trying to navigate the world of holistic health in a balanced, productive way that brings health to our lives instead of dogmatic extremes. We'll be breaking down health trends, interviewing your favorite health influencers, and always keeping it real. We hope this podcast brings listeners back down to earth, providing a dose of reality in the often idealized world of health and wellness.
Wellness Reality Check. Follow the show now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at wellnessrealitycheck.com.